I'm Tim Simic, the Support Manager for Color Label Solutions. Color Label Solutions is the premier provider of print-on-demand color and GHS label systems. In this video, I'm going to cover the installation, configuration, and usage of Bartender Print Portal. The following is the product overview as stated by the manufacturer, Seagull Scientific. Bartender Print Portal is a web-based application that provides an interface for selecting and printing Bartender documents. Users can print documents simply by browsing to a web page hosted by a server that has Bartender installed. Print Portal, introduced with Bartender 2016, includes many features that make locating and printing documents quick and easy. Running on a web server, Bartender documents are available from any computer connected to the Internet. With its built-in security measures, administrators can require users to log into the site, and even assign user permissions granting access to specific documents on the server based on the user logged into the site. Print Portal's intuitive interface lets users quickly locate the document they need to print and send it to the printer with a simple click operation. So now let's take a look at the installation. To configure your Windows PC for web hosting, you're going to have to enable Internet Information Services. So you're going to open up your control panel and go to Programs and Features and select Turn Windows Features on or off. You're going to enable Internet Information Services. Click OK. And restart your computer to complete the operation. Print Portal is a member of the Bartender Enterprise Automation Suite. You can download a trial edition at seagullscientific.com by selecting Bartender Trial from the Downloads menu. I recommend downloading the 64-bit full installer. Run the installer and select the following advanced installation options. A word of caution here: if you already have Bartender Designer installed in your environment and wish to test the Print Portal, it's important that you have the license server installed on only one computer. Now that we've installed the software, let's see how to access the Print Portal. So you'll call up a web browser and you'll type in for the address http:// followed by the IP address of the computer that you have hosting Print Portal, followed by a /bartender. That brings us to the main Bartender page, where we'll click on Print Portal. That brings up the document browser for us. Let's print a chemical label. Here we get into Print Document, where we can select a printer, enter in how many copies, and print. Here I'm going to cover where your label files are kept for Print Portal. So back when we installed Internet Information Services, it created a folder on the root level of your drive called initpub. And inside here, if we drill down into it, we've got www.root and Bartender and Documents, and that's where your label files are kept. Print Portal puts some sample files in there that you can freely remove, and in addition, you can put your label files in there. Noteworthy is that you do not have write privileges to your label files while they are inside this folder. So if you need to edit a label file, you need to drag it out somewhere such as your desktop and edit the file there, save it, and then return it to this location. So it'd be a good idea to make note of that path so you can manage your documents. So let's take a look at our administrative settings. So you come up here to this little wrench looking icon and drop down the menu and select Administrative Setup. So here we have our settings. To begin with, we have on mouse click, show print dialog box, or immediately print. If you select immediately print, just upon clicking the label, it just dumps it to the printer. You have control over the level of error and warning messages. Show folders in document browser. With that option enabled, you will indeed see folders that you put into the documents folder. And let's come on and drill down into that. And there's our file. Okay, next we have Show Folder Navigator. So first we'll take a look at it with the Navigator disabled. And you get this kind of a view. The Navigator is what I would call the sidebar, which is hidden right now. So let's come back and we'll take a look at that. And I'll enable the Navigator. And make sure if you're making changes here in the administrative setup that you always click the OK button to lock in your change. So click OK on that and go back. If you do click it, you should wind up in this screen after you apply that. And here's our navigator right here. Okay, so that's it for the folder navigator. The next setting is show folder icons in Navigator. Let's take a look at that. And you see we have the icons here opposed to just the names. And let's disable that and take a look. And there you have it without the icons. And I think it looks cleaner. Display information when mouse pointer hovers over control. Comments and file information. So we have those enabled right now. Let's take a look at them. And that's what you get. Okay, now we have the last setting in the general category, which is override default instructional text. And you can see here by default it says select item to print. Now in order to leverage this setting, you have to disable the show folder navigator. And we'll take a look at that again. Okay, with the navigator disabled, we have this view. And see it says select item to print. Okay. So now we're going to go back to the setup. Okay, something funny. And we'll check that out here. So now we've got the override default instructional text. No folder navigator. And there you have that. That completes the general category on the administrative setup. So now let's take a look at root folders. So in here we see that you have a source folder and visibility. And that we have a folder that's named documents, the one we discussed earlier that's inside the init pub folder on C. And then we have applied a name to that folder, root folder. So let's see how that is realized in the print portal. So go ahead and click OK on that, and go to print portal. And we can see that we have our root folder there. So now let's see what we can do with this here. It's kind of cool. So I'm going to make 3 additional folders here. So I'm going to go to new, and I'm going to name that clothing. And I'm going to filter that for clothing. And I'm going to make another one. call it military. And filter it for military. Okay, and then let's make one more. And I'm going to make that shipping. And filter it for shipping. And now let's take a look and see what we have. Okay, so now we have the root folder, and that has all our labels. And we have clothing, military, and shipping. So we see we're filtering out everything that doesn't have the name that we're applying to it. And we'll go back here. So now that we have this, let's go back and take a second look at it. Perhaps we don't want to have every file visible when root folder is selected. So let's see what we can do about that. So let's go back to administrative setup and root folders again, and we'll filter on that. So basically you just have to put in something that doesn't match. So it could be anything. So let's just call it hidden. And we'll go ahead and click OK on that. And back to the print portal. And now you can see that we're not seeing any label files in the root folder. Okay. Okay, and there's one last thing that you can do in here, and that is you can restrict access to those folders. So for instance, we're going to pick clothing, and we'll click on this visible to selected users and groups. And I'll click on add. And maybe we only want administrators to be able to access that. So I would select administrators and click OK. And now you see we've restricted the clothing folder to only administrative accounts. And you could also do that on the user level as well. Now let's take a look at the security section of administrative setup. By default, it's set to disable authentication. Users will not need to log on to access Bartender web applications. All users will have access to files and the ability to change the administration settings. This is recommended for smaller organizations where user-based security is not a concern. Okay, now let's see what we can do about locking it down a little bit more. So I'm going to come over and enable authentication over HTTP. It's going to prompt me for an administrative authentication. And I have to remember to click OK on that. Let's try it again with our web browser. And we'll try to get into Print Portal. And it's prompting me. Using a standard user account. Okay, so I can get into printing labels with my standard user. And now let's try to go into the administrative settings. And you see that I cannot do that. So I'm going to go back home here. So let's go ahead and log off as our standard user. And now I'm going to try and log in again. And let's try to log in as administrator this time. Okay, and I can get into Print Portal to print labels. And now let's try to access the administrative setup. And as you can see, I can get right in there. Okay, so now we drop down here to enable authentication over HTTPS. Basically the same thing, but when you're selecting the HTTPS, what that's doing is it's encrypting the transaction traffic that's going out over the wire. So you would do that in situations where maybe you have a wide area network and you have a site maybe in California and then a site over in like Washington, D.C. So when you're trying to access your labels from California to Washington, that's going out over the internet. And there is a potential there that somebody could capture those packets and capture your password, perhaps, and bad things could ensue. So because of that, you're going to want to select Enable Authentication over HTTPS. That would be the purpose for that. Now, noteworthy is it's not as simple as just clicking that button. There is additional configuration involved, as well as you have to implement an SSL certificate. An SSL certificate can be purchased from a company such as VeriSign. And you can also create a self-assigned certificate, but the drawback to that is every time somebody loads that website, they get kind of a scary warning message that advises them that they may be entering a counterfeit website. So depending on your environment, that may or may not work for you. Okay, now let's take a look at user-based security. To assign permissions to individual users and groups, use Bartender System Administration Console. So the Administration Console allows you to get more granular on how you manage your security. So let's take a look at that here. And for that we have to bring up Bartender. And again, this is the Enterprise Automation. And we're going to go down to Administration Console. We're going to need to check Enable Security for this PC. And then we'll come down to User Permissions. We're going to drop down here to Print Portal. And here we have administrators and then users by default, just local users. So when I select administrators, I can see that I have both the run and administration permissions for Print Portal. When I select users, and we'll come down here again, I can see that we've lost the administration ability in Print Portal by default. Okay. You can change those obviously here, but noteworthy is if we create a user, just hypothetically, and then perhaps that user is a member of several groups, and one of those groups deny him administration capability, it kind of errs on the side of caution, so it would default to not letting that user have administration ability, just because one of the groups that he's in denies that. So that's important to know, because if you're having issues trying to assign a user administration permissions and you find that he does not have them, you need to go back and kind of start looking through his groups and check the permissions on the groups. Okay, so that said, let's go ahead and add a user here. I created one earlier, and let's look for him. I named him loser because he doesn't have admin permissions. So that's our just kind of standard user here. And I'm going to click OK to add him. And when I select him here, and I'll drop down the Print Portal again, I see that he only has run permissions. And I can verify that by right-clicking, checking the effective permissions, which I advise doing. And then we're going to look for Print Portal here. And we can see that he only has run, he's X'd out on administer. Okay, so now let's go ahead and give him administration rights. And I'll apply that. And let's check him again. And we can see that he now has administration permissions within the Print Portal. The checkbox at the bottom of the page is for when a standard user is trying to access something that requires administrative rights. With that checked, he'll get a prompt for a login and password where an administrator can come over and log in for him. If that's unchecked, if he tries to do that same thing, he'll wind up with an error message stating that he does not have rights to perform that function. And that's how you manage the user-based security in the System Administration Console. Okay, now let's look at features to disable. And the first item is printer selection. Printer selection, when enabled, locks the printer selection in the print dialog to the printer specified in the Bartender document. So we'll take a look at that. So let me OK that. I'll go back into Print Portal. I just printed this label to an Epson C3500 printer. So that printer now should be locked in the print dialog box. So I'll click on that. Okay, and you can see here with the printer list, when I click on that, it does not show any other printers other than the one that was selected prior to me enabling that setting. Okay, so let's come back. Okay, let's go back to the administrative setup. Print quantity. And with that selected to disable, you would not be able to add to your copies right here. Document search. Document search would disable the search field here. You wouldn't be able to enter any data into it. Document print preview. This button would become disabled. Okay. Changing view options. And lastly, we have the changing view options feature that we can disable. And that's this little drop down up here. So if I click on that, right now we have detail view. Here you can change to icon view. And we can also control the size right there. And if you want, you can show file extensions. So if we look at clothing here, that's the actual file name without the extension. I can turn the extensions on. You see that they're Bartender files. And you can change the language here also if you have multiple languages on the computer. And that covers the changing of the view options. Here I'm going to show you how to add and remove printers. So to do so, I just click on any label to bring up the print dialog box. And we'll take a look at what we have here so far. And we have a C7500 and PDF. So to add a printer, we're going to click on Add or Change Printers. And here we just see our C7500. And we're going to go click here to add a new one. And we've got the printers connected to my computer. That would be a USB printer connection. And here we have printer is connected to the web server. That would include that as well as printers that are out on your Ethernet network. So I'm going to add a network printer. So I'm going to click on that one. And I'll hit next. It provides me the printer list. And I'm going to click C3500 and click next. And finish. And OK. And you see now we have the C3500 is there amongst the group. To remove printers, it would be the straightforward reversal of what we did. You just go back in there and select the printer and hit the X to get rid of it. And click OK. And that removes it. Okay, next let's take a look at print settings in the administrative setup. So the first item under print settings is don't allow the following printer models to be selected. So when people are in the print portal and they go to print, you may not want them to have the whole list of every printer out on your network available to them. So that can be mitigated by dropping down this menu and checking the ones that you do not want to have available. So let's kind of take a look at that and see how we realize that in the print portal. So I click on a label and then we click on add change printers and we go to add and we'll look for network printers and you see our list is limited to just what we have deselected in there. It's not showing all that other frivolous printer stuff that we don't want to have available. Okay, so we'll cancel out of that and we'll go back to the administrative setup. Next we have allow users to print to server printers. Server printers would encompass shared printers from the server as well as printers sitting on your Ethernet network. Below that, we have the inverse, allow users to print to client printers. So if we disable that, they would not be able to select or print to any USB printers that are connected to the computer. And next we have allow users to print to PDF documents. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Go into my chemical label. From the printer list, you'll choose PDF and click on print. And there's the file. You can go ahead and click on the printer icon. And there's the settings. I recommend downloading the latest version of Adobe Acrobat Reader, which is called Adobe Acrobat Reader DC. So here's the DC print dialog box. You do have some pretty nice functions over here. Normally you would use actual size if your actual label size here matches the setting in the printer driver as it should, but you do have some functions to, in case it doesn't, to make it fit. Okay, and so we would go ahead and print that here. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that. Also back to Reader DC, if we drop down the file menu here, we have a save as, which gives us an opportunity to save the file. So pick a destination. I'm going to select desktop, and you can name the file and save it. And here it is right here. Okay, and we can just X out of this and cancel out of this and back to the settings. And lastly here we have allow non-administrator users to add custom printer configurations. So if we disable that, the non-admin users would not be able to add printers. They would just be stuck with whatever you configured for them in the list. Okay, now we move down to client print technology. And it says select the available client printing technologies to use. And we have Web Print Service for Windows and Java Applet for Mac. Those are selected by default, and now it's been kind of too long since I got this set up to remember whether anything prompted me for this stuff upon the first running of it. Anyway, for the Windows only web service, apparently the first time you print a document, you'll get prompted to install the web service, and then that gives you access to client printing and advanced printing and print job status monitoring. So likely it wouldn't hurt to leave that checked. As far as the Macintosh, not kind of sure about the Java applet thing. I can tell you that you need to have enable JavaScript enabled in the security section of Safari in order to run that. So you will need to have JavaScript active in your browser on a Mac or likely a Linux machine too. So that's kind of all I got on that one. Okay, now let's drop down here to client printing compatible models. And it says you can define wildcard or regex values to automatically match client printer models with a compatible printer driver on the server. So, okay, what does that mean? It has to do apparently with hosting a printer on the client machine opposed to the server. If you do that, apparently you have to have a printer driver on both the server and the client workstation and named both the same. And then apparently you can define wildcard values to match your printer models with a driver on the server. So an example would be worth 1,000 words here, and I've got no example in there's documentation or anything to see how to do this. So kind of vague on the subject, but that's all I have on that one. Okay, now that completes the print settings category. Let's move down to printers. Okay, and here's where you add the printers so that they'll show up in the print portal interface. So right now we just have a 3500 showing, and let's take a look at that to verify. So go into our print portal, click on a label to get into the print interface, and we see that we've got a 3500 and the PDF, but no other printers. Okay, cancel out of that, and we'll go back to administrative setup and printers. And let's add one now. So you'll click on this little icon down here for new. And again, the web server is also network printers that are on your Ethernet network. So I'm going to add one of those. I'll hit next. And I'll go ahead and select the 7500 network. And I'll hit next. And finish. Okay, and let's see what else we've got here. Go for another one. Server, next. And we've got the 7500G. Let's add that one too. And finish that. And we'll OK on that. And we'll check this out in the print portal. And go in here to our printers. Before we only had the 3500. And now let's drop down our list. And we have both the 7500s as well. So that's how you do that. Okay, and that concludes the printers section. And now we come down to the last category in the administrative setup, the advanced category. In advanced, we have two configuration options to choose from. The first is save documents after printing, and the second is maximum number of print preview images to generate per request. I'm going to go ahead and cover this second one first. So you notice I have 7 set in there. So maximum number of print preview images to generate per request is 7. And let's take a look at that. So let's go to Print Portal. And we're going to look at my chemical label. Okay, so we have the quantity of copies to preview. And I'm going to go ahead and set that to 10. And then let's take a look at the print preview. Now, if you recall, we set the maximum number of print previews to 7, and we set it to print 10. So let's take a look and see what we have here. And we have 7 available. And that number fits pretty nicely across the page. Now, the print previews here would come in handy if we were printing, say we had a serialized data or variable data label. So we wanted to preview and make sure that we're seeing that variable data manifest itself in each label. So perhaps we have just a number field and we're seeing that number incremented in each one. That said, another reason to limit this would be just overhead on the server. So say we're going to print out 500 labels. You wouldn't want to have 500 print previews generated. That would just be a lot of overhead on the server and slow things down. So you can mitigate that by setting a limit number there. Okay, now let's go back to the administrative setup. Okay, now let's take a look at the first option that we have in the advanced category, save documents after printing. So I'm going to click to enable that. And the first option is save if a document contains serialized fields. So perhaps we're a company and we're making an electronic piece of equipment and we want to have an individual serial number on each one we sell. So we've set up a label that way. That would be covering that. And then we've got save if a document has been modified. So that's pretty straightforward. If we are printing and we make any kind of a change to a document whatsoever, maybe there's a form to attach to the label, something like that, it's going to save that label automatically. That does also encompass the serialized fields option as well. And then here we have the last one, always save documents. So that means any document that we open up and print, it's going to save. To me, that seems like some unnecessary overhead on the server, because if you're not making any change to the document, why would you want to save it? Well, there may very well be some reason for that, but unless you have a good one, I probably wouldn't select that one. The middle one would likely be the normal option to select from. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and set it for the modified and OK that. Okay, so I created a label with a serialized data field, and let's see how that works. Okay, so let me start off with 1 here, and we'll print preview it. And we see that we're ready to print serial number 4. Okay, so let's see what happens when we jack this up to 3 copies. And as expected, we have 3 copies of serial 4. So let's lower that back down to 1, and we'll increment this one up to 3 copies. And we have 4, 5, and 6. So pretty much as expected. So you can, add 3 and 3 or however you want to do that, and it would in turn react accordingly. Okay, so that's how that works. And we'll return to administrative setup. That completes the advanced category of administrative setup. So I showed you how to print a serialized label. How about I show you how to set one up? But first, a word. To me, my job is not so much providing tech support, but rather it's about helping people. I hope I have helped you by creating this video for you. Okay, on to the label setup and more. Okay, now on to how to create a serialized data field in a bartender label. So create your label. You're going to need to create a text box. Then right-click on the text box and select Properties from the contextual menu. When you get into the Properties dialog, you're going to select Transforms. From here, you're going to drop down to Serialization and click on the button to the right. And just make note of the settings that are in this dialog box. I will mention that the print quantity is relatively unimportant. What that's going to do is when you go to print your label, these will be the default values that are in the print dialog box. So they could be relatively anything. I just used ones. It's what's above this line here that's important. Okay, so let me OK out of this, and we'll close this. And now let's print preview to check our work. So I'll click on the printer icon, and then I'm going to click on the preview button. You can check our values here. We have 1 and 1. Let's make it a little bit more interesting. We'll crank this up to 3. So we've got 3 serial numbers, 1 copy of. And this is the values that we were looking at that I mentioned before. Okay, so we'll preview that. And we have 1. And we see it says page 1 of 3. So I'll click on next. We can see it's serial number 2. And next, it's serial number 3. So that's all there is to it. And that concludes our tutorial video on Bartender Print Portal. I hope that you found it to be helpful. At Color Label Solutions, it's our goal to provide all of your label printing needs, including tech support. You can find us on the web at www.colorlabelsolutions.com. Thank you and have a great day.